We leave parts of ourselves in every digital footprint we create, drifting like ghosts through a metallic world of data. Join us as we explore the intersection of human memory and the future of storytelling in high definition. Click subscribe now to follow the digital trail.
Nah. The call came at 2047 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone right before the other car ran the red light and hit me on the driver's side. I remember the sound of the glass. I remember the airbag hitting my face. I remember someone in scrubs leaning over me in the parking lot of the intersection saying, "Stay with me, okay? What's your name?" And I remember thinking, very clearly, that I needed someone to call my husband. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a high school English teacher in Columbus, Ohio. And the day I was hit by a drunk driver at 2047 on a Tuesday afternoon, my parents were 40 minutes away doing absolutely nothing. My husband Daniel was in Seattle for a work conference, 3 time zones away. He had left Sunday morning, kissed me on the forehead while I was still half asleep, and told me he'd be back Thursday. The conference was a big deal for him. A 3-day software summit that his company had been preparing for since January. I told him to go. I told him I'd be fine. He was listed as my emergency contact. He had always been my emergency contact. When the paramedics found my phone and couldn't reach him, he was in the middle of a presentation. Phone on silent, completely unreachable. Hospital protocol required them to go down the list. The next name was my mother. Her name is Patricia. My father is Gene. They live 42 minutes from Columbus Memorial, where the ambulance took me. I know this because I have made that drive more times than I can count. Holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners. I didn't particularly want to attend but showed up to anyway because I believe that was what a good daughter did. I had a grade 3 splenic laceration and internal bleeding. The ER trauma surgeon told me this later. He also told me that if I had arrived 20 minutes later, or if the surgery had been delayed much longer, the outcome would have been very different. He said, very different. The way doctors do when they mean something they don't want to say out loud. I was conscious when they wheeled me in. I was conscious through the initial scan. I could answer questions and squeeze fingers and tell them my name and birthday. But somewhere between the second scan and the prep room, my blood pressure dropped and I lost consciousness. And that is when they needed someone to sign the surgical consent form. Daniel was still unreachable. My parents were next on the list. The hospital called my mother at 3:04 p.m. She answered on the second ring. The nurse explained the situation clearly. Her daughter had been in a car accident, had internal bleeding, needed emergency surgery, and because the primary emergency contact was unreachable, they needed a family member present to authorize the procedure. My mother said, "How long does she have?" The nurse said they needed to move quickly. My mother said, "Is she conscious?" The nurse explained that I had lost consciousness. My mother said, "Let me call you back." She called back 11 minutes later. By that point, the surgeon had already been paged twice. My mother told the nurse that she and my father would come as soon as they could, but that right now there was a situation with my younger sister, Brooke, and they were helping her handle it. She said it shouldn't take more than an hour or two. She said to tell me they were thinking of me. The situation with my sister Brooke was this. Brooke had accidentally booked a nail appointment at 3:30 that afternoon, and had just realized she had also committed to picking up my mother for a different errand at the same time. It was a scheduling conflict. Brooke was upset. She was 26 years old. She had a driver's license, and she was upset about a scheduling conflict involving a nail appointment. And my parents stayed home to help her sort it out while I was unconscious on a table with internal bleeding. The nail appointment cost her $80. I know this because my mother told me later, in a tone that suggested I should understand why this was complicated. Daniel found out at 3:22 p.m. when a hospital administrator reached him through his company's emergency line. Whoever made that call, I have never found out who it was, but I am grateful to them every single day. Somehow tracked down the conference venue and had the front desk pull him out of the room. He told me later that he walked into the hallway and a woman handed him a phone and said, "Your wife is in surgery." He said his first thought was that he had misheard her. His second thought was that he needed to get to the airport. He left his laptop, his luggage, and his conference badge in the hotel room. He took his wallet and his phone and he got into a cab and he called the airline from the back seat. There were no direct flights until 6:40 p.m. He booked it. Then he called my parents. My father answered. Daniel told me he stayed very calm. He explained what had happened, where I was, what surgery I was having. He asked why they hadn't gone to the hospital yet. My father said they were dealing with something with Brooke, but they were planning to head over soon. Daniel asked what they were dealing with. There was a pause. My father said it was a scheduling issue, and it was more complicated than it sounded. Daniel said, very quietly, Jean, Claire is in surgery right now. There is nothing more complicated than that. Then he hung up and called the hospital to give them his verbal authorization over the phone, which the surgeon confirmed was sufficient to proceed. I woke up at 6:15 p.m. in a recovery room with 2 nurses and no family. One of the nurses held my hand and told me the surgery went well. She told me my husband had called 4 times and was on his way. She told me I was going to be okay. I cried. Not because I was in pain, though I was. I cried because I had woken up in a hospital room after emergency surgery. And the first person to hold my hand was a stranger. And the strangers were kinder to me in that moment than my own parents had been. My mother and father arrived at 7:30 p.m. By that point, I was awake, medicated, and hooked up to monitors in a regular room. My mother walked in carrying a tote bag with a container of soup she had made. She actually stopped to make soup, and she kissed me on the forehead and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you look terrible." My father stood at the foot of the bed and said he was glad I was okay. Neither of them apologized. Neither of them explained the delay in a way that acknowledged what it actually was. My mother mentioned twice that the drive had been hard on her nerves because there was construction on Route 23. My father turned the TV on at a low volume without asking. I lay in that hospital bed and I looked at them and I thought, I almost died today. And you were helping Brooke figure out her nail appointment. I didn't say it. I had a drainage tube in my side and I was on pain medication and I did not have the energy. I just looked at the ceiling and waited for Daniel. He walked in at 9:47 p.m. He had been traveling for over 6 hours. His shirt was wrinkled and he hadn't eaten since breakfast, and he had a look on his face when he came through that door that I had never seen before. Not panic, not relief exactly, but something stripped down and raw, like a person who has had several hours to imagine the worst and is only now letting himself believe it didn't happen. He crossed the room and took my face in his hands and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked up. My parents were still in the room. My father muted the TV. Daniel said, "I'd like a moment alone with my wife." It wasn't a question. My mother started to say something about the soup. Daniel looked at her in a way that made her stop talking. They left. He sat beside me and held my hand for a long time without either of us saying much, and at some point I fell asleep. And when I woke up again, he was still there, asleep in the chair beside the bed with his head at an angle that looked deeply uncomfortable. And I thought, that is what it looks like when someone actually shows up for you. I was in the hospital for 4 days. Daniel stayed for 3 of them, sleeping in the chair, eating vending machine sandwiches, taking notes when the nurses came in so he could repeat the instructions to me later. He went home on day 4 only because I made him. He had already missed 3 days of the conference and I could see the exhaustion in his face, and I told him to go sleep in an actual bed. My parents visited once more, briefly, on day 2. My mother brought magazines. My father sat in the corner and scrolled through his phone. Brooke did not come at all. She sent a text that said, Claire. Hope or okay? And that was the entirety of her response to my emergency surgery. When I got home, I had 6 weeks of recovery ahead of me. I couldn't drive. I couldn't lift anything heavier than 10 pounds. I needed help with basic things for the first 2 weeks. Cooking, laundry, getting in and out of the shower. Daniel worked from home for the first week. A colleague of mine organized a meal train. My neighbor came over twice to sit with me so Daniel could go into the office. My parents called a few times. My mother offered to come help once things calmed down a bit. Things calmed down a bit approximately 5 weeks after my surgery. She came for 4 hours on a Saturday, reorganized my kitchen in a way I didn't ask for, and told me I needed to be more careful about my driving habits. I want to be clear. I have not always had a difficult relationship with my parents. There was a time when I thought our family was normal. My sister and I grew up in the same house, with the same parents, eating dinner at the same table every night. I have good memories from childhood. But Brooke has always been the center of gravity in our family. She is 4 years younger than me. Funnier, louder, more dramatic, and my parents have oriented themselves around her comfort since she was approximately 7 years old. I learned early on that the path of least resistance was to be easy, to get good grades, to cause no problems, to handle my own difficulties quietly, and not add to the collective stress of the household. I went to college on an academic scholarship. I paid for graduate school myself. I got my teaching certification, got my job, moved into an apartment, and then into a house with Daniel after we got married. I built my life carefully and without asking for much. In the 4 years since our wedding, I have given my parents money 6 times. Not loans. They were never framed as loans and I never expected repayment. There was a time my father's car needed a new transmission. $100. The time my mother's dental work wasn't fully covered by insurance. $900. 2 rounds of help with property taxes when money was tight. $750 and $600. And $600. A cash gift when Brooke needed first and last month's rent for a new apartment. $1,200. And the time Brooke's car broke down and my parents paid to fix it, and then quietly mentioned they were short that month. $800. That's $5,650 over 4 years. I'm not saying this to sound like a martyr. I'm saying it because it's the context. I gave freely and I didn't resent it. And then I was lying in a hospital bed with a drainage tube in my side, and my parents were 40 minutes away helping my sister decide whether to reschedule a nail appointment. I want to tell you when exactly I stopped pretending this was okay. It was 3 weeks after I came home from the hospital. I was still recovering, still moving slowly, still having occasional pain when I turned the wrong way. My mother called on a Wednesday evening and we talked for about 15 minutes. And at the end of the call she said, very casually, "Oh, and Brooke's birthday is coming up. We were thinking of doing a nice dinner, maybe that Italian place downtown. You know how she loves it there. Did you want to go in on a gift together?" We were thinking something around $150 from the 2 of us. I said I'd think about it. I sat on the couch after I hung up, and I thought about it. I thought about all of it. And I decided that the version of me who would have said yes, transferred the money, and shown up to that birthday dinner, smiling. She had been in a car accident 3 weeks ago, and she didn't make it. I told Daniel. He listened to the whole thing, not just the birthday money request, but all of it. Everything I had been carrying for years. The pattern I had been too close to see clearly. Until I was staring at the ceiling of a recovery room with no one beside me. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said I wasn't sure yet. He said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I did not go to Brooke's birthday dinner. I sent a card. I did not send money. My mother called twice to ask if I was coming, and I let both calls go to voicemail. She left a message, saying she hoped I wasn't still upset about everything that happened, and that it would mean a lot to Brooke to have the whole family there. I was not there. Nobody said anything directly to me about it for several weeks. The situation came to a head, as these things do, at a family gathering I probably should not have attended. My mother's side of the family does a big 4th of July cookout every year at my aunt and uncle's house. My mother's brother, maybe 40 or 50 people. Cousins and neighbors, and a handful of people I only see once a year. It's a long-standing tradition, and I have been going my entire life. Daniel and I went. I was fully recovered by then, physically at least. I wore a sundress and brought a pasta salad and said hello to everyone. I was supposed to say hello to. At some point in the early afternoon, I was standing near the drink cooler with my cousin Lisa, who is one of the few people in my family I would describe as fully on my side. Lisa is 34, a nurse, and the kind of person who says what she's actually thinking. She had texted me 3 times while I was in the hospital, called twice, and mailed me an actual card with a real handwritten note inside. She knew what had happened. She had been quietly furious about it for weeks. Brooke came over to the cooler. She was in good spirits, talking loudly, wearing new sunglasses. She looked at me and said, "Claire, oh my God, you look so much better. You were looking really rough for a while there." Then she laughed like this was a normal thing to say. I looked at her for a moment. I said, "I'm glad I look better. I had emergency surgery 2 months ago." She said, "Oh, I know. It was so scary. We were all so worried." And I don't know if it was the sun or the 2 months of recovering in my house while my family carried on with their lives, or just the particular way she said, "We were all so worried," as if worry were the same as presence, as if sending a text counted as showing up. But something in me just settled into a kind of quiet clarity. I said, "Were you? I didn't realize. I didn't see you at the hospital." Brooke blinked. "I mean, obviously I couldn't come right away." "You didn't come at all," I said. "And Mom and Dad didn't come for 3.5 hours because you had a nail appointment." The cooler was near the picnic tables. Several people were sitting close enough to hear. The conversation nearby got quieter. Brooke said, "It wasn't just a nail appointment, Claire. I had a whole scheduling thing." "I know," I said. "An $80 nail appointment. I almost bled out while you figured out your schedule." My mother had appeared at some point. She said in her voice that means stop making a scene. "Claire, this isn't the place, Mom," I said. "You called the hospital back 11 minutes after they told you I needed emergency surgery. You said you'd come when you could. You made soup." I paused. "You made soup?" She started to say something. I kept going, not loudly, not emotionally. Just clearly, in the same even voice I use when I'm explaining something to a student who isn't getting it. "I have given this family $5,650 in 4 years. I was your emergency backup contact at the hospital because my husband was out of town. You were 42 minutes away and you didn't come because Brooke had a scheduling conflict. Daniel flew in from Seattle. He left his work conference and flew home from 3 time zones away, and he got there before you did." There was a long silence. Someone's kid dropped a cup somewhere across the yard. My aunt, my mother's older sister, a woman who says very little but watches everything, said from her lawn chair, "Patricia, is that true?" My mother didn't answer. I looked at Brooke. "Happy belated birthday," I said. "I hope the dinner was nice." Then I went and found Daniel, who was talking to my uncle near the grill, and I said, "I'm ready to go whenever you are." He looked at my face and said, "I'll get the pasta salad dish." We were in the car in 4 minutes. I won't pretend the drive home was easy, or that I felt triumphant. I felt tired. I felt the particular exhaustion of having said a true thing in a room full of people who would have preferred I stay quiet. And I wasn't sure yet whether I had done the right thing, or just the necessary one. Daniel drove. After a while he said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Like I just set something down that I've been carrying for a really long time." He reached over and put his hand over mine, and we drove the rest of the way without talking. My mother called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called again the next morning. I listened to the message. She said that I had embarrassed her in front of the family and that it wasn't fair to ambush people like that, and that she hoped when I calmed down we could have a real conversation. I texted back, "I'm calm. I said true things. When you're ready to have a real conversation, you know where to find me." That was 11 weeks ago. My mother has not called since. My father sent a text 2 weeks later that said he hoped things would blow over. I did not respond. Brooke sent me a voice memo that was 8 minutes long and consisted mostly of her explaining her perspective on the scheduling conflict. I listened to the first 90 seconds and then put my phone face down on the counter. I have not given my family any money since the hospital. Not because I'm punishing them. I genuinely don't think of it that way. It's more that I finally understand the exchange that was happening, and I'm no longer interested in participating in it. Lisa texted me the day after the cookout. She said, "For the record, everyone there already knew your parents were wrong. You just said it out loud. There's a difference." I read that about 6 times. Daniel and I had dinner last Friday, just the two of us, at a restaurant we've been meaning to try for months. We split a bottle of wine and talked about a trip we want to take next year, and laughed a lot at something I can't even remember now. At some point he said, "You seem lighter." I thought about it. I said, "I think I am." I think there's a version of this story I used to tell myself, where the problem was that my family didn't love me enough. But that's not quite right. The problem was that I kept measuring their love by my own standard, by what I would do for them, what I had done for them, and then feeling confused and hurt when the math didn't work out. At some point you have to stop doing the math and just look at what's actually in front of you. What was in front of me was a hospital room with a drainage tube and a stranger holding my hand. What was in front of me was a man in a wrinkled shirt who flew home from Seattle because the thought of me alone in surgery was not something he was capable of tolerating. What was in front of me was my own life, which I had nearly lost, and which apparently my parents were willing to postpone for an afternoon over a scheduling conflict involving an $80 nail appointment. That's what was in front of me. I just finally looked at it. I'm not interested in revenge, not really. I'm not interested in making my family feel bad, or in airing anything beyond what has already been said. I'm interested in living in a way that is proportional to what I know now, about what I'm worth, about who actually shows up, about the difference between people who are present when it costs them something, and people who are present only when it costs them nothing. My father's car is going to need a new transmission eventually. He drives an old truck, and it's been making a noise for years. When that happens, I won't be the person he calls. And I won't be guilty about it. That is not the daughter I used to be, but I think it might be the woman I should have been for a long time.